Here is Tanu. Tanu is 3 years old, and a very young sea otter. And last but not least, everyone to the right-hand side is Nyack, and Nyack is 19 years old. So there's a pretty big gap in ages there. And as you look at these 3 otters, it's pretty obvious that there is a little difference in coloration between them, and that is because of their age. Sea otters grow older, and they get lighter. So Tanu, who is below me here, is a very dark sea otter, compared to Nyack, who is very blonde at the age of 19. Now, when you hear the name sea otter, it's pretty obvious that sea otters do live in the sea. More specifically, those sea otters can be found in the North Pacific. So that's from California, upper coast, all the way to Alaska, and even over to Russia. So it's a pretty big range that these sea otters live in. Off the coast of BC, you can find sea otters living in what's called the kelp forest. Now, if you're not too familiar with the kelp forest, it's a very dense underwater ecosystem, much like a rainforest or a jungle, but it's based around that tall and fast-growing marine algae called kelp. Sadly, during the 1930s, off the coast of BC, sea otters were hunted to extinction. They disappeared completely. You could not find a single sea otter off of our coast. And this was because they were very rare. They were hunted for their fur. It was incredibly valuable during the time, and they disappeared very quickly. And when those sea otters off of our coast disappeared, the kelp forest that they call home disappeared with them. So throughout this feed, we're going to quickly explore how the link between sea otters and their eating habits is directly linked towards that kelp forest that they call home. As you're watching these sea otters eat this afternoon, you may start thinking of your own dinner. I'm not too sure if you're eating the same thing. They're getting a surf clam dinner. We eat clams there, I'm not too sure. They do look a little different than the clams you find when you head to the beach. They are missing that hard protective shell that would protect most bivalves like clams and mussels from predators like sea otters and the environment. Of course, sea otters in the wild would have to get through that hard shell to get to the meat inside. And they're very smart animals, and they can get through shells very quickly. They'll dive down to the ocean floor, they'll find a piece of food they're interested in eating, and along with that piece of food, they'll find a rock. Now they'll bring both the rock and the piece of food to the surface, placing the rock on their chest, and they'll smash the food against it. Kind of in a reverse hammer process, and by doing so, they're able to get through any hard shells they may encounter. We do have this very large piece of glass viewing window towards the back of the habitat, so we do not give these sea otters rocks for the obvious reasons. Besides the surf clam these otters are eating here, sea otters in the wild eat just about anything they can get their paws on. And the ocean floor of the kelp forest is pretty much a big buffet for a sea otter. There's plenty of food down there. There's crab, there's shrimp, there's urchin, there's abalone, squid, maybe even an octopus. Not surprisingly, being surrounded by so much food, sea otters eat a lot. And you'll witness that firsthand here. Sea otters do eat for a long period of time, and they eat a lot of food. In fact, the sea otter eats about 1/4 of its body weight every day. Now that's pretty amazing to think about. If you weighed 100 pounds and you had to eat 1/4 of your body weight in a day, that's about 100 1/4-pound hamburgers, which is pretty gross to think about. You may be thinking with sea otters eating so much food that they can't be so beneficial to their surroundings, and that's the complete opposite. Sea otters are considered a keystone species. Now that means that their environment relies on them. Now to prove this, you have to know that the sea otter's favorite food is the sea urchin. Sea urchin is a purple or green spiky ball. It's an invertebrate, meaning it has no backbone. And sea urchins live on the ocean floor, and they're like a grazing animal. They sort of eat kelp, and they eat it very quickly and in large amounts. So in the 1930s, when all the sea otters from our coast disappeared, the sea urchin population was left unchecked, and they multiplied very quickly, and they ate a lot of kelp, which kind of left the ocean floor like a desert. It doesn't support much life. In fact, it's called an urchin barren. Now, luckily for us and sea otters, they're now protected species, and they were reintroduced to the coast of BC, and they've made an amazing return. And along with the return of the sea otters, the kelp forests have returned with them, which is not only great for sea otters, which call that kelp forest home, but many other marine mammal species and fish that rely on that kelp forest for shelter. As you're watching these guys eat this afternoon, it's pretty obvious they do spend a lot of time on the surface of the water. They do occasionally dive down to find a piece of food, but they do bring it back to the top where they'll chew and swallow it. If you've spent any time along the coast of BC, you know that the weather is not always so great. It can be a very cold, windy, and harsh environment. Even colder if you spend your life in the water. If you've had a chance to see the beluga whales today, you know that they're covered in a layer of fat or blubber, and that helps them stay warm in their Arctic home. But as you look at these sea otters, it's important to realize they don't have a single ounce of body fat on them. And when I say that, some people get jealous, but most marine mammals do rely on body fat or blubber to stay warm in their cold water. So instead, these sea otters have that dense layer of fur that helps them stay warm. And and it's doing a pretty good job of that. Their fur is actually the densest of any animal in the world. And to give you an idea of how thick it truly is, if you were to put your thumb on any of these three, any sea otter, in fact, under your thumb in that small animal, under your thumb in that small area, there'd be more fur than the entire human body has hairs. So pretty dense, and it does keep them very warm. Just like a jacket, their fur keeps them warm, and just like a jacket that you and I might wear, their fur actually has a pocket or two. Now that does sound a little strange, but if you take a look at Nyack's armpit up front there, just under her armpit there's an extra fold of skin. Now that fold of skin acts like an armpit, acts like a pocket. She's able to store things in there, so if she finds an extra bit of food that she wants to save as a snack, she can tuck it in her armpit and pull it out later when she's hungry. Unfortunately, even a well-fed and warm sea otter is not without its threats. And the biggest threat to sea otters today still remains a human form, not so much in the form of hunting, but in oil spills. Nyack up to the front on the right there is a survivor of the 1989 Exxon Valdez oil spill. She was found at the age of 6 months and completely covered in oil. Now she tried grooming herself, which means licking your fur, and when a sea otter's fur isn't covered in oil, it's not too healthy. Nyack was one of the fortunate sea otters who was rescued and rehabilitated, and as you can see, he's doing amazingly well for a 19-year-old sea otter. We can all do our part to help reduce the risk to sea otters in the wild. It's very simple. Simple as riding your bike to work, walking to school, or just turning the lights off as you leave a room. The smallest of actions definitely has an impact on the amount of patrolling, traveling up and down the coast of BC, putting sea otters at risk. And hopefully throughout today's speech, you've learned how important sea otters are to that kelp force that they call home. And on behalf of myself, these three still very hungry sea otters, Milo, Nyack, and Tenu, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day here at the Vancouver Aquarium.